Da 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 da. Angel of music, blah 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 blah, blah 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 blah, blah blah. I used to be a big Phantom of the Opera fan. I'm not gonna lie. I love Phantom of the Opera, dude. I just do. You know what? I like the story. I like the whole idea of it. I like the Phantom himself is a very sympathetic kind of a figure. Christine Daae, right? Really lovely. The whole narrative of the Phantom taking over an opera house, right? And then like the gothic kind of like do 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 do. Phantom of the Opera was like a big deal for me when I was like a little kid. When I was like 14. Oh man, I'll never forget. I was living in Winnipeg, and my mom, Phantom of the Opera had come through, right? Came through Winnipeg, and I said to my mom, we're living in like Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, small town Manitoba, and I'm like, Ma, Phantom of the Opera, it's in Winnipeg, we gotta go. And Mom, thinking that like, oh, this is something that's just gonna come back around, it's like a movie or something, right? Like she doesn't really have an understanding of what this is. So she lets it pass. We never actually go, right? And then she kind of, as time unfolds, she kind of understands what this was and what it was kind of a missed opportunity. And like I grow up and I'm still like listening to the albums. I'm like singing the songs. I'm like doing all that stuff. And so I moved to Toronto, like all that kind of stuff. Years pass, and then I come back and visit Winnipeg once. And while I'm in Winnipeg, I'm like looking around and I'm looking at signs and stuff. I'm like, oh, Phantom's in town. How about that? And of course, I'm like over the Phantom stuff. Like I still, secretly love the Phantom of the Opera, but I'm not like a Phantom head or anything. And I'm like looking up and I'm like, oh, hey, Ma, look, Phantom's in town. Oh, okay. And Mom goes, yeah, it is. And she pulls out 2 tickets. And we go see Phantom of the Opera together. That was very nice. That was a very nice mother-son moment. What a beautiful. You know what? Good to see you, Eric. Good to see you, Anemone. How you two doing? You know what? I just told a nice story about my ma. Let's play a song. Where do I want this? I've been singing this song too low, so I'm gonna go super high, and suffer the consequences. These times they are uncertain, of that there is no doubt. But nobody can tell me quite what it's all about. The heartbreak and the loneliness, the chaos and the fear will make even the strongest cry. I wish my ma was here. A young man on a battlefield fights for a rich man's gold. The bullet cracks into his spine. He knows he won't grow old. And as the tears come streaming down, and once his mind goes clear, the war was fought for nothing, he cries, I wish my ma was here. A lively story well in hand, a joke to soothe your soul. And when it came to arguing, she'd forgive and let it go. And when I cried, she held me, told me it's okay, my dear. And as we face these darkened days, I wish my ma was here. And as we march into the streets, as all the righteous do, we'll raise our voices to the the skies, we cannot stop the truth. And as we tear their structures down, we'll raise a victory cheer. We made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. Yeah, we made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. What's Phantom of the Opera? Phantom of the Opera is a like a rock ballad opera created by Andrew Lloyd Webber, the same fellow who did Cats, right? Which, incidentally, Cats is a really fun stage presentation that has never been put on film properly, because it's just a story about cats. There's nothing to it. He did Jesus Christ Superstar as well. And, yeah, it just really stormed the 90s, right? Like, think about, it's a musical, like a stage musical, that has made like $1 billion. Like, it's a phenomenon, right? Like, it's a worldwide phenomenon. And the story of it is as straightforward as a social reject, who is the Phantom, has inhabited an opera house by discovering its secret hidden passages, right? He lives in caves that come out of the opera that nobody knows about. So he's something of a ghostly figure. And he becomes infatuated with one of the opera singers, Christine Daae, and wants her to become the greatest thing ever. And so essentially begins to woo her. But then, of course, through the passage of the piece, begins to see himself not as a reject, but actually as the monster that people think he is. And so he, spoiler alert, frees Christine Daae and disappears from the opera house, never to be seen again. It is actually the reason why I think the piece is so wonderful is that, first of all, the music is, it's like, I think it's got cool music, but the arc of the Phantom himself is actually quite beautiful. That it's like, he's an incel, you know? Like, he's an incel. He's a social reject that can't get a girl, and so pursues this Christine Daae person in like the most toxic way possible, right? And ultimately comes to realize what a mistake it all is, right? And yeah. So it's an international phenomenon. It's one of those things straight up. If you see a clip of it, or if you see it and you think to yourself, this is bullshit, I'm gonna go, you're right. Like, it's definitely one of those where it's like, you either love it or you hate it. You're either in it. Stop making a point about Poto. What's Poto? I'm noticing that ever since I had the headache, I have to sleep 12 hours every day. I wake up after 8, have to go back to bed shortly after, sleep for another 4. Yeah, dude. Of course it's out of character for you. Eric, man. Like, you're on the long road, dude. Every time you talk to me about this, dude, I'm just like, holy cow. What a journey you're on, you know? The universe, this is what the universe has put in your lap. This is what the universe has said to you. Eat this, Eric McRae. Eat it. And you are eating it. Right? See? Conton's there being like, stop talking about Phantom of the Opera. You shut your mouth to the Phantom of the Opera. See what I'm saying? And Conton, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's like the guiltiest of guilty pleasures. I might as well be talking about Housewives of Miami or something right now. Like, oh my God, did you say what Britney said? Oh my God. Right. But hey, you know what? Such is life. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm fucking exhausted today. Slept like crap. I'm having nightmares. It's as simple as that. I'm having nightmares, right? And it's difficult for me to pretend like the nightmares are anything but, like, what the fuck, right? What the fuck? What the fuck is happening? It's an absolute shit show out here, right? So I've got a couple articles here that we're going to go through. One of them is from the absolutely brilliant Chris Hedges. I have read and listened to literally everything that Chris Hedges has written. I think that he is very prescient. I think he knows what's going on. And then, after we do that, I've got a piece here from Jordan Peterson. Because you got to know what your enemies are saying. And what's terrifying about this article, when you get to it, you'll see what I'm talking about, is that he's done a good job of diagnosing the disease, right? But like all of these far-right lunatics, their diagnosis is accurate. I've been saying this about the PPC the whole time. They're accurate in their diagnosis. They know what's going on in the society. Their solutions are batshit crazy, right? And we'll go through it. So brace for impact. Brace for impact. We're going to get rid of this one. So I'm just going to jump right in. Chris Hedges. The global ruling class is frog marching us towards extinction. We were warned for decades about the death march we are on because of global warming. And yet, the global ruling class continues to frog march us towards extinction. The past week has seen record-breaking heat waves across Europe. Wildfires have ripped through Spain, Portugal, and France. London's fire brigade experienced its busiest day since World War II. The UK saw its hottest day on record of 104.54 Fahrenheit. In China, more than a dozen cities issued the highest possible heat warning this weekend, with over 900 million people in China enduring a scorching heat wave along with severe flooding and landslides across large swaths of southern China. Dozens of people have died. Millions of Chinese have been displaced. Economic losses run into the billions of yuan. Droughts, which have destroyed crops, killed livestock, and forced many to flee their homes, are creating potential famine in the Horn of Africa. More than 100 million people in the United States are under heat alerts in more than 24 states, from temperatures in the mid to upper 90s and low 100s. Wildfires have destroyed thousands of acres in California. More than 73% of New Mexico is suffering from an extreme or severe drought. Thousands of people had to flee from a fast-moving brush fire near Yosemite National Park on Saturday, and 2,000 homes and businesses lost power. It is not as if we were not warned. It is not as if we lacked scientific evidence. It is not as if we could see the steady ecological degradation and species extinction. And yet, we did not act. The result will be mass death, with victims dwarfing the murderous rampages of fascism, Stalinism, and Mao Zedong's China combined. The desperate response is to burn more coal, especially with the soaring cost of natural gas and oil, and extend the life of nuclear power plants to sustain the economy and produce cool air. It is a self-defeating response. Joe Biden has approved more new oil drilling permits than Donald Trump. Once the power outages begin, as in Indiana, the heat waves will exact a grim toll. Half of humanity is in the danger zone from floods, droughts, extreme storms, and wildfires, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told ministers from 40 countries meeting to discuss the climate crisis on July 18th. No nation is immune, yet we continue to feed our fossil fuel addiction. We have a choice, he added, collective action or collective suicide. The Anthropocene age, the age of humans, which has caused the extinction of plant and animal species and the pollution of the soil, air, and oceans, is accelerating. Sea levels are rising 3 times faster than predicted. The Arctic ice is vanishing at rates that were unforeseen. Even if we stop carbon emissions today, we have already reached 419 parts per million. Carbon dioxide concentrations will continue to climb to as high as 550 ppm because of heat trapped in the ocean. Global temperatures, even in the most optimistic of scenarios, will rise for at least another century. This assumes we confront the crisis. The Earth is becoming inhospitable to most life. The average global temperature has risen by about 1.1 Celsius, 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit, since 1880. We are approaching a tipping point of 2 degrees Celsius, when the biosphere will become so degraded, nothing can save us. The ruling class for decades denied the reality of climate change, or acknowledged the crisis and did nothing. We sleepwalked into catastrophe. Record heat waves, monster droughts, shifts in rainfall patterns, declining crop yields, the melting of the polar ice caps and glaciers, resulting in sea level rise, flooding, wildfires, pandemics, the breakdown of supply chains, mass migrations, expanding deserts, the acidification of the oceans that extinguishes sea life, the food sources for billions of people. Feedback loops will see one environmental catastrophe worsen another environmental catastrophe. The breakdown will be non-linear. These are the harbingers of the future. Social coercion and the rule of law will disintegrate. This is taking place in many parts of the global south. A ruthless security and surveillance apparatus, along with heavily militarized police, will turn industrial nations into climate fortresses to keep out refugees and prevent uprisings by an increasingly desperate public. The ruling oligarchs will retreat to protected compounds, where they will have access to services and amenities, including food, water, and medical care, denied to the rest of us. Voting, lobbying, petitioning, donating to environmental lobby groups, divestment campaigns, and protesting to force the global ruling class to address the climate catastrophe proved no more effective than scrofula victims' superstitious appeals to Henry VIII to cure them with a royal touch. In 1900, the burning of fossil fuel, mostly coal, produced about 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year. That number has risen threefold by 1950. Today, the level is 20 times higher than the 1900 figure. During the last 60 years, the increase in CO2 was an estimated 100 times faster than what the Earth experienced during the transition from the last ice age. The last time the Earth's temperature rose 4 degrees Celsius, the polar ice caps did not exist, and the seas were hundreds of feet above their current level. You can watch my 2-part interview with Roger Hallam, the co-founder of the resistance group Extinction Rebellion, on the climate emergency here and here. There are 3 mathematical models for the future. A massive die-off of perhaps 70% of the human population, and then an uneasy stabilization, extinction of humans and most other species, an immediate and radical reconfiguration of human society to protect the biosphere. The third scenario is dependent on an immediate halt to the production and consumption of fossil fuels, converting to a plant-based diet to end the animal agriculture industry, almost as large a contributor to greenhouse gases as the fossil fuel industry, greening the deserts and restoring the rainforests. We knew for decades what harnessing 100 million years of sunlight stored in the form of coal and petroleum would do to the climate. As early as the 1930s, British engineer Guy Stewart Callender suggested that increasing CO2 was warming the planet. In the late 1970s into the 80s, scientists at companies such as Exxon and Shell determined that the burning of fossil fuels was contributing to rising global temperature. There is concern among some scientific groups that once the effects are measurable, they might not be reversible, and little could be done to correct the situation in the short term. A 1982 internal briefing for Exxon's management noted. NASA's Dr. James Hansen told the U.S. Senate in 1988 that the buildup of CO2 and other gases were behind the rise in heat. But by 1989, Exxon, Shell, and other fossil fuel corporations decided the risks to their profits from major curbs in fossil fuel extraction and consumption was unacceptable. They invested in heavy lobbying and funding of faux research and propaganda campaigns to discredit the science on the climate emergency. Christian Parenti, in his book Tropic of Chaos, Climate Change and the New Geography of Violence, quotes from The Age of Consequences, the foreign policy and national security implications of global climate change. A 2007 report produced by the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Center for a New American Security, R. James Wolseley, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, writes in the report's final section, in a world that sees 2-meter sea level rise with continued flooding ahead, it will take extraordinary effort for the United States, or indeed any country, to look beyond its own salvation. All of the ways in which human beings have dealt with natural disasters in the past could come together in one conflagration. Rage at governments' inability to deal with the abrupt and unpredictable crises. Religious fervor, perhaps even a dramatic rise in millennial end-of-day cults, hostility and violence toward migrants and minority groups, at a time of demographic change and increased global migration, intra- and interstate conflict over resources, particularly food and fresh water, altruism and generosity would likely be blunted. The profits from fossil fuels and the lifestyle the burning of fossil fuels afforded to the privileged on the planet overrode a rational response. The failure is homicidal. Clive Hamilton, in his Requiem for a Species, Why We Resist the Truth About Climate Change, describes a dark relief that comes from accepting that catastrophic climate change is virtually certain. But accepting intellectually is not the same as accepting emotionally the possibility that the world we know it is headed for a horrible end, Hamilton writes. It's the same with our own deaths. We all accept that we will die, but it is only when death is imminent that we confront the true meaning of our mortality. Environmental campaigners, from the Sierra Club to 350.org, woefully misread the global ruling class, believing they could be pressured or convinced to carry out the seismic reconfigurations to halt the descent into a climate hell. These environmental organizations believed in empowering people through hope, even if the hope was based on a lie. They were unable or unwilling to speak the truth. These climate Pollyannas, as Hamilton calls them, adopt the same tactic as doommongers, but in reverse. Instead of taking a very small risk of disaster and exaggerating it, they take a very high risk of disaster and minimize it. Humans have inhabited cities and states for 6,000 years, a mere 0.2% of the 2.5 million years since our first ancestor sharpened a stone, the anthropologist Ronald Wright notes in A Short History of Progress. The myriad of civilizations built over these 6,000 years have all decayed and collapsed. most through a thoughtless depletion of the natural resources that sustained them. The last iteration of global civilization was dominated by Europeans, who used industrial warfare and genocide to control much of the planet. Europeans and Euro-Americans launched a 500-year-long global rampage of conquering, plundering, looting, exploiting, and polluting the earth, as well as killing the indigenous communities, the caretakers of the environment, for thousands of years, that stood in the way. The mania for ceaseless economic expansion and exploitation, accelerated by the Industrial Revolution 2.5 centuries ago, has become a curse, a death sentence. Anthropologists, including Joseph Tainter in The Collapse of Complex Societies, Charles L. Redman in Human Impact on Ancient Environments, and Ronald Wright in A Short History of Progress, have laid out the familiar patterns that lead to systems breakdown. Civilizations, as Tainter writes, are fragile, impertinent things. Collapse, he writes, is a recurrent feature of human societies. This time, the whole planet will go down. There will, with this final collapse, be no new lands left to exploit, no new peoples to subjugate, or new civilizations to replace the old. We will have used up the world's resources, leaving the planet as desolate as the final days of a denuded Easter Island. Collapse comes throughout human history to complex societies, not long after they reach their period of greatest magnificence and prosperity. One of the most pathetic aspects of human history is that every civilization expresses itself most pretentiously, compounds its partial and universal values most convincingly, and claims immortality for its finite existence at the very moment when the decay which leads to death has already begun. The theologian Reinhold Niebuhr writes in Beyond Tragedy, Essays on the Christian Interpretation of Tragedy. The very things that cause societies to prosper in the short run, especially new ways to exploit the environment, such as the invention of irrigation or use of fossil fuels, lead to disaster in the long run. This is what Wright calls the progress trap. We have set in motion an industrial machine of such complexity and such dependence on expansion, Wright notes, that we do not know how to make do with less or to move to a steady state in terms of our demands on nature. The U.S. military, intent on dominating the globe, is the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases, according to a report from Brown University. This is the same military that has designated global warming a threat multiplier and an accelerant of instability or conflict. The powerlessness many will feel in the face of ecological and economic chaos will unleash further collective delusions, such as fundamentalist beliefs in a god or gods who will come back to earth and save us. The Christian right provides a haven for this magical thinking. Crisis cults spread rapidly among the Native American societies in the later part of the 19th century as the buffalo herds and the remaining tribes faced extermination. The ghost dance held out the hope that all the horrors of white civilization, the railroads, the murderous cavalry units, the timber merchants, the mine speculators, the hated tribal agencies, the barbed wire, the machine guns, even the white man himself would disappear. Our psychological hardwiring is no different. The greatest existential crisis of our time is to do at once be willing to accept the bleakness before us and resist. The global ruling class has forfeited its legitimacy and credibility. It must be replaced. This will require sustained mass civil disobedience, such as those mounted by Extinction Rebellion, to drive the global rulers from power. Once the rulers see us as a real threat, they will become vicious, even barbaric, in their efforts to cling to their positions of privilege and power. We may not succeed in halting the death march, but let those who come after us, especially our children, say we tried. Whew. 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 Hedges, man, he lays it out. He lays it out. We are at that point now. Like, if you're gonna hand wave this shit away, then I consider you worse than a Nazi. Like, really. Even if you're one of these, like, dopey liberal types. Being like, we can negotiate with the sun. No. It's over, man. It's over. Fight or die. Fight or die. Yeah, as Bo Burnham would say, 40,000 years of this, 7 more to go. Bo Burnham, man. That guy was born to do what he's doing. Like, he's an absolute genius. Yeah, this article gives me serious suicidal ideation. Yeah, no shitting, eh? No shitting. You know what? This is something I haven't talked to anybody about. But it's for real. Like, sometimes I'll just be standing there, like, drinking a cup of coffee. Or, like, I don't know, sitting on the toilet or something. And the thought does pop into my head. You know, you could just kill yourself. Right? It's something that's been happening. And like, that's fucked up, eh? Isn't that nice? Isn't it nice? You're just having a nice day, sitting around, kicking it, and then the thought pops into your head. Boy, it'd be so easy. It'd be so easy. It'd be so easy. Go to the top of this building and jump. Go to this. I used to work in funeral services. I know exactly how I'd do it. It'd be easy. It'd be so easy. Anybody could do it at any time, right? And you start asking yourselves, like, and suicide rates are going through the roof. Like, suicide rates are going through the roof, right? And it's pretty clear why. Like, it's pretty obvious what's going on, right? But it's never been in my spirit, you know? I've always, like, if you're gonna commit suicide, why not just, like, take some of these fucking psychos out with you while you go, right? Make a big stink about it. That's my position. Like, make a big stink about it. If you're gonna do it, don't do it quietly. Make a big stink. Let them know. Let them know that we're gonna take some of these guys with us. But I heard Elon Musk and the technocrats will save us. Danarchist. Nailing it. Nailing it. Yeah, I'm dead serious considering purchasing a firearm for home defense when the brutality becomes unbearable and survival is entirely unlikely. For ease of mind, my suicidality is entirely conditional. It's a choice between dying fast or dying slowly by hunger and heat. I'm not checking out for the whim or hell of it. Yeah, and honestly, like, Content, I really admire that you are speaking this way. I really do. Like, suicidal ideation is something that we have to actually open this up and talk about, right? And because there's children in the conversation, and they're not respecting what's going on at all, right? As we're going to see pretty soon, right? As we're going to see pretty soon, that the children in the conversation are not taking these issues seriously at all. And talking about suicidal ideation and the realities of what that is and what that means and how it affects us and how it's impacting the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation, right? And how it's impacting all of us and the people around us. Yeah, we should openly talk about it, unabashedly. And if people get embarrassed, that's their fucking problem. Because, like, suicide jokes have become part of millennial culture, right? Like we've broached it in comedy and in jokes and in all of this kind of stuff. But it's rooted in something desperately real. It's rooted in something desperately real. And we have to surround the halls of power. Like, my feeling is if you're willing to take the steps required to commit suicide, well, then you should be willing to take the steps to get in these people's way. Let the machine kill you, right? If you're willing to jump off a bridge or get a firearm and shoot yourself, if you're willing to do any of that, well, let the machine kill you and let your bones jam up the gears. Let that be the way you go out. Not quietly, but as a martyr. As a scientist, physicist, I can honestly say we are fucked. That nothing or no one is coming to save us. Yeah, let's say we can build something to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Engineers would have to make a blueprint and build you. No one has ever built a machine like this before. You know what I find so funny, Danarchist, about this? Because this is what Westerners do. We're going to make an invention. You don't need to make an invention to pull CO2 from the atmosphere. We have it. It exists. It's called trees. It's called trees, for God's sakes. Like, we should be planting billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of trees. We should be doing everything we can to prevent clear-cutting of forests. We should be doing everything we can to say to the people who are planning to tear down the Amazonian rainforest that you're psychos and you shouldn't do it. Like, there's plans in the Congo. They want to sell sections of the Amazon rainforest to let the oil industry tear down those trees. You know what we should do? We should pay the Congolese to keep the rainforest intact. We should look at what the fossil fuel industry is willing to pay to destroy the species, arrest those people, throw them in prison cells for being psychotic Nazis, and then pay the Congolese to keep the rainforest intact. Let them develop by keeping a resource we all need, right? Why is it that the rainforest is not considered a valuable resource that we should maintain, that we should pay to maintain? Why is it that that's not considered valuable? Because we're psychos, and we're being ruled by psychos. It's incredible to watch. It's incredible to watch. We don't need to build anything. How many times have I said this? We don't need to build something. We don't need to do something. We don't need to create anything. We literally just need to stop polluting, and the world, the earth that created the garden we live in and created us, will do it for us. The earth created all of this. The earth is so clearly and obviously more powerful than we are. But in huge ways, in massive, overwhelming ways, the earth is far more powerful than we are. And we've got it in our head that we've got to make something or do something or when all we need to do is stop polluting. Literally, stop. Just stop it. Right? And of course, this is when the hacks jump in and they're like, well, you want to create a famine. Like, there are billboards lit up. Yonge and Dundas Square right now. Times Square right now. Billboards lit up for no fucking reason. Other than to like promote the fucking Real Housewives or Tim Biebs or some goddamn dumb bullshit. For us to be like, oh yeah. NFTs are still a thing. Using up as much power as entire countries. Cryptocurrencies are still a thing. Using up as much power as entire countries. Right? We are not serious about this at all. There are major things. We're still letting Kim Kardashian take private flights. We're still letting Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Richard Branson shoot their dumb rockets at the moon or whatever. Right? We're still acting like we can just burn all of this shit and pretending like we can't, well, we've tried nothing and we're out of ideas. There's so much we could do. There's so much we could do to stop polluting. And any narrative that comes out of anyone's mouth other than stop polluting is fraudulent salesmanship, trying to get you to buy a product to enrich them exclusively. They're not interested in preventing climate change. They're not interested in a technological solution. They're interested in grifting you the way that they did with the green movement, right? They just slapped green stickers on stuff and said, hey, get for the Obama. And we were all supposed to take that seriously. Well, that's all fucking over. And it's time to take all of these fraudulent, lying, sociopathic salesmen, put them in jail cells, take away their toys, and stop polluting. And you know what's going to happen if we do this? If we just stop the pollution, the just overt, overwhelming, obvious levels of pollution that we're just spewing out for no fucking reason at all on bullshit toys like NFTs and Bitcoin, you know what's going to happen? The earth will heal itself. And how do I know that it's perfectly capable of doing this? Because it created us in the first place. It wants it to be this way. This is how it is. We're the ones changing it. And so the earth is going, okay, if that's what you want. If that's what you want, baby. This is your show. You keep saying this is your show. Right? You do it, baby. Absolutely. You know what's going to happen, though, right? Okay, babe. You know, I created the perfect conditions for humans to thrive and survive, to spread throughout, billions of humans existing, right? I created the perfect environment for you to live in a perpetual, infinite, sustained kind of a way, to coexist peacefully in my environment. But if you want to change it, baby, okay. Like, we're not in a fight with the earth. The earth is just letting us do what we want. And it will happily stand aside and be like, okay, well, I'm going to turn into a desert. I'll be a desert planet like Dune, right? Like Tatooine or whatever, right? You guys try, this is what you wanted. Because if you didn't want it, you just stop, right? Right? That's all you'd have to do. It would actually be easy. This is the part of the conversation that gets just embarrassing for the apologists of this climate death. It's actually stupidly easy, like baby-ishly easy, to not destroy the planet. It's shockingly easy to not destroy the planet. We did it for thousands of years. We've done it for most of human history. We managed to not destroy the planet. You know how you do it? You stop running these engines. You turn the key to the off position and walk away. You stop. You stop. We don't need to build shit. Quite the opposite. Wow, shame Westerners have all been lobotomized, aren't going to resist or try at all. Hedges touched on a lot of things that I think are real in this conversation, Oddity. Like, there's a retreat into magical thinking, right? Jesus Christ is coming back, right? The Christian death cult, which is seizing power and taking power in America, right? The death cult is unrepentant, heretical. They don't read their own book, right? They're illiterate. They worship money. Basically, every single time I hear them say the word God or Jesus, just replace it with money, and then what they say is actually accurate, right? And so there's the retreat into magic. And then I also think there is the call to the void, which again Hedges touches on. The call to the void, right? That I think that there are huge sections of humanity. I especially see it in the millennials, right? Like, the boomers are more caught up in magical thinking, as you're going to see very shortly, once I finally get to the article. But the millennials are definitely looking at at the void. There's this sort of sense of like, oh, it'll be over soon, right? There's this Bo Burnham quote, right? That Anemone put up here, right? Bo Burnham would say, 40,000 years of this, 7 more to go. What is that except an acceptance of the call to the void, right? Just like, oh, thank God, it'll be over soon, right? That's what this is. That's what this is. And those of us who refuse to fall into magical thinking, those of us who refuse to accept our mass murder, because I'm not calling it a suicide. Like, I'm not committing suicide, right? Well, we're left to resist. And how do we resist? Well, eventually it'll come to the point where we've got to start doing stuff that'll get me banned for saying on YouTube. Very straightforwardly. It's what is going to happen. Because the ruling class has gone psychotic. Just ask the Wet'suwet'en people. Like, it is going to come down to it. And we've got to decide whether or not we're willing to do it. Gordon Fiala, buy Dumbledore to sponsor Rowling. I have no idea what that means, bud. Surround the halls of power, hold the powerful hostage. Yeah. Jill Gates says we can block the sun with advanced balloons and reflectors in orbit. Yeah, right? Like this is the type of crazed lunatic, like supervillain shit that we're gonna see before we actually confront capital, right? We're literally gonna put like sun blocking technology. We're gonna blot out the rays of the sun and shit like this before we actually go, maybe we should stop polluting, right? And why? Why? Because Bill Gates owns the technology. And so he's gonna make another $1 billion grifting a gullible, magical thinking populace into believing that this is going to do anything but continue to fuck us over. Yeah, we should green Death Valley, absolutely, like the Chinese have done, right? They have a desert called the Sea of Death that they are greening and being successful, right? But we're not going to do that, right? Westerners can't plan or have ideas or thoughts, right? That's not how it works. Jill Gates billionaires will save us. Yeah. Amazon in South America as well. Yep. Well, and I mean, Brazil, right? Bolsonaro is like, he's straight up an eco-fascist. Like, he's straight up just like burn it down for money. Like, no question. Honestly, my evil side of me wants to let the climate change occur and then say to the survivors, say to them, you keep claiming communism killed more people and satanic. Yet see what capitalism has done and destroy and kill billions of people. No, but Eric, this is the thing. They're just going to say things like, this is just natural. This is just, it's normal. It's normal. That this is just how the earth does the things. Right? They'll never accept responsibility. I think that's something that we have to come to terms with. That the psychopaths responsible for creating and generating this apocalypse will never accept responsibility. And in fact, if you come to them and arrest them, they will scoff. They will believe that you are the authoritarian. You're arresting people and incarcerating them for crimes? Authoritarian. That's exactly what they'll say. Right? We're dealing with a detached, narcissistic, psychopathic death cult. They are incapable of accepting reality. And when we actually get the power to arrest these people, they will scoff and laugh and roll their eyes the entire time, even as they go to jail. And then write a book about how unjust it all was and how they're the true victim. It's precisely what will happen. Christian Death Cult is an interesting band, yeah. So no cruise vacations? No, fuck, what the fuck are cruise vacations? Like, fuck you with these cruise vacations. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, park that shit. Just park that shit. John, that'll kill the economy. Good. Fuck your economy. if you read the book of Revelations, it's crystal clear that Jesus won't come back until all the 7 horsemen. Isn't it 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? It's the 7 seals, isn't it? It is 4 horsemen. It's 7 seals. Destroys the planet. And we see that the horsemen, man-made, they're genociding deserts. Such pure evil. I know, right? The Chinese. Yeah, the Chinese did green the Sea of Death. It's quite impressive. Yeah. I mean, it's still got work to do, obviously, but like they're making headway. That's the part of it that is very impressive, is that they are making headway. It's not bullshit. It can be done. If the Chinese can do it in the Sea of Death, the Americans can do it in Death Valley. But they're not going to. They're too incompetent and corrupt. And murderous, frankly. Just like fucking murderous. Like, oh, we got to do something that doesn't involve killing and lynching people? Well, I'm not interested. Hey, Watson. How you doing, bud? Hey, Nut Milk, how you doing, bud? Call me, what are your thoughts on libertarianism? Yeah, it's brain rot. Just straightforwardly. Like, you can disprove anything any libertarian in America says by playing one game of Monopoly once. Right? Because the libertarian position is that the problem is that we're not doing true capitalism. And if we did true capitalism, then there would be this utopia of blah-diddy-blah-diddy-blah. And they fail to recognize, because they're baby brains with brain rot on top of it, that the system is designed to do this. This is what capitalism does. Play a single game of Monopoly. You can watch it happen in real time, right in front of your eyes, right in front of your fucking eyes, right? And then once you recognize that, like, oh, all of the money comes under the hands of a single person or a small group of people, it doesn't take a genius. It takes, even these baby brains should be able to figure out that, oh, if I've got all of the money, I'm going to buy the political apparatus. Right? It's literally the first thing anyone with money would do. And to think that they wouldn't is stupid. Like, these libertarians, they're correct in their assessment that something has gone wrong, but their solutions are as stupid as it gets. Like, literally like that episode of Simpsons where they're digging a hole and they're super far down the hole, and then they're trying to get out of the hole by digging further. And then somebody goes, no, dig up, stupid. That's what we're talking about when it comes to libertarians. There's no such thing as an intelligent libertarian. They are all incredibly fallacious, stupid, brain-rotted baby brains. Right? And when you actually start digging into one of these guys, most of them reveal that they're fucking psychopathic mass murderers. Most of them will just let people starve and die. Most of them are as bad as Nazis. Once you start really digging into it, that their views are not much different than what the Nazis were saying. Like literally, if you can't sell yourself successfully to a business, you deserve to die. That kind of shit. Do not take libertarians seriously. They are the most terrifying people on the planet. But John, I love my cruise vacation. Well, you better. Have a good time. Right? While the ocean acidifies. Have a nice time. The need to build golf courses in deserts that use massive amounts of water. This is capitalism at its finest, pure brain rot. Yeah. Like, this is what happens when you worship money. When all that matters is money. Right? Like, if that's the only thing, if that's your only goal, this is the result. Right? We don't have capitalism, we have corporatism. Yeah, libertarian numpies avoid the understanding of evolutionary nature of the system they think will create their quote-unquote freedom. Yeah, scratch a right-wing libertarian, you'll find a fash. Yeah, like, that it's, oh no, this is crony capitalism. Right? These moronic, babyish phrases. Like, no, this is capitalism. This is what it does. Right? They're acknowledging the corruption of the system while attempting to separate it from their non-existent fantasy version of what capitalism actually is. Right? Like, The end result of capitalism is this. Every time, 100% of the time. It will always do what we're seeing. By the force of its existence. Play one game of Monopoly. Eric's, I recently learned something very interesting. I was watching a documentary about the fall of the USSR and the consequences of it. One thing that has happened, all the property that the old monarch and rich people were given, and the wages are far below the 1989 level. Also, women's rights were essentially abolished, subject to patriarchy, which led to a dramatic increase of sexual assault, crimes, rape. Since they are not able to have their basic needs met, much higher crime rates are occurring. In one sentence, the entire region is going through hell. I had a libertarian telling me this is false to say that libertarians want a market of children, but that is what they want. Like, that's the thing. Like, a libertarian who tells you that they're not interested in slave markets and all that kind of stuff is no libertarian. That's what they want. That's their ideology, right? That if you can't sell yourself for profit to the ownership class, which they, for whatever reason, pretend won't result in an oligarchy, if you can't sell yourself to these guys, then you deserve to starve and die. That is their position. It's psychotic. And only the deepest of brain-rotted babies or depraved psychopaths can maintain it. That's why you see a lot of 14-year-olds talking this way, right? It makes sense when you're like a little kid. But if you're a grown man talking this way, yikes. Yikes, 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 yikes. Ugh. Speaking of grown men talking this way, let's hit this button first. Sorry about the ad. Maybe it's the t-shirt. Maybe it's Dr. Squatch. Everybody's got to tell me in the chat. I hope you guys are doing really well out there, man. What a time to be alive, right? What a time to be alive. So, one of the things that libertarians and the far right are good at, right, is that they're good at pointing out the failings of liberalism, especially this group of liberals, and then pushing the society towards the conservatives and the fascists, right? That, oh, look at how bad that's failing, we will do so much better. And here's an article that's come from Jordan Peterson, right? Literally published 5 hours ago, that really captures this in action. So Jordan Peterson, worst is yet to come from Trudeau Liberals. Rough times are a-comin' with what with the cascading consequences of energy shortages, supply chain disruptions, war in Ukraine, and severe and looming food and fertilizer shortages. Engineered in exile. Before I start, I keep getting ultra-conservative ads on other leftist channels I frequent. I think the algorithm is confused, or someone is paying a lot of money to spread their poison. Yeah, it's a classic strategy, right? Deflect as much as you can. Like, people who come here, you're interested in politics, aren't you? You're interested in politics. Well, don't you want to see what we're saying over here? And if I can convince you that we're somewhat sympathetic to you, right? While pipelining you away from the more what they would call radical positions, like people should have food and shelter, then they will. And of course they're spending a ton of money to do that. Like, obviously. Like, I get ads, people tell me I get ads for like the Epoch Times on this. People tell me I get ads for like Shen Yu and stuff like that on this, right? And we're diametrically opposed to one another. So, of course they're doing that. I don't think the algorithm's confused at all. I think they know exactly what they're doing. So, I have had the great privilege of traveling to 40 American cities, in just about as many states, and to 15 European countries in the last 4 months. In the waning days of the great COVID panic, and I have learned many things about our great and self-conscious nation. First, I've not traveled anywhere else where the citizens and the government are more neurotically concerned about the pandemic. It may have escaped Canadians' notice, but virtually nowhere else in the developed world is it now required to wear a mask, as it is still mandatory in many Canadians at airports and on flights out of our benighted country. There is absolutely no excuse for this, except the punitive self-righteousness of the Trudeau Liberals. What else might you expect, however, from a government that also includes Chrystia Freeland, a deputy prime minister who has bragged about her colleagues' appalling economic performance, claiming that it's actually good for Canadians to empty their wallets at the gas pumps because of its implications in fighting the climate emergency. So immediately the dismissalism, right? I simply cannot believe that this absolute failure of economic policy is now being trumpeted as a positive accomplishment. Here's a hint for you saintly progressives. If you cared about the poor, the real poor, not the hypothetical poor you are hypothetically saving in the future, you would seek to drive down the cost of energy. Energy that is precisely equivalent to work and therefore to the wealth that ameliorates poverty. Notice how he's not actually saying give your money to the poor, the way that his Christ does, right? He never says this. This is how you know you're dealing with a fraud, by the way. Like, he's got a Bible in his hand that he says is the foundation of all truth, that tells him explicitly, give your money to the poor. But his solution, no, you need to drive down the cost of energy. Because that's what will matter for the poor. Certainly not the rich, right? Certainly not the rich, right? Raid Shadow Legends. Fantastic. Second, it is almost impossible to overstate the degree to which Canada's international reputation has been damaged by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This is actually true, by the way. This is why Peterson's fraudulent brand of conmanship is so effective. Just like Pierre Poilievre, right? That he does tell the truth from time to time, right? Like this first chapter here, this first one, you could essentially call getting on board, right? That we're getting everybody in a group and being like, if you agree with this concept, then let's move forward from here, right? Second, the Americans I have talked to, including very well-placed politically on the Democratic and Republican fronts alike, listen in disbelief when I recount the claim brought forth by the Trudeau Liberals that the trucker freedom convoy was financed by Americans hell-bent on bringing about a January 6th-style insurrection in Ottawa. Who would benefit from that, even in principle? Even if the Americans, Republican MAGA types, say, cared about us, which they don't, why in the world would they want to destabilize Canadian democracy? I mean, to seize our resources, Jordy? Like, have you not been paying attention? No. Anyway, what's the motive to justify the crime? Resources, bud. Resources. Right? Disabling our democracy, going to war with us? Well, you think America's not interested in going to war with us? They're going to war with everybody else. Right? Like, just no sense of imperialism, but that's okay. There is none, sure, okay. Even the American Democrats think this idea is insane. Yeah, but the American Democrats, like, are worthless. So who cares? He's just saying even the American Democrats think this idea is insane as if it's like, even the commies! Like, and a non-trivial proportion of Canadians seemed willing to buy the story, despite its demonstrably falseness and preposterousness, because the alternative was the truly painful realization that governmental institutions and some specific members of the media, especially the CBC, gotta dig the CBC, have now become fundamentally incompetent, right? It's true, right? It's true. It's easier for too many smug and blind northerners to swallow the line instead that madmen mega-Trumpists want to destabilize what is, after all, their biggest trading partner and most stable and reliable ally, to believe that Confederate admiring truckers, and is there more than a single one of those, are working in concert with the evil orange-haired demon who once ruled the United States. And, even worse, is Prime Minister Trudeau so deluded that he failed to notice that these same mega-terrorists are going to utterly shellac the hapless Democrats this coming fall and take the presidency in 2024, and that we will then have to talk, trade, and otherwise consort with them, as they are the perennial elephant on our doorstep, and that burning all bridges in that direction with casual derogation might not be particularly politic? The unfortunate answer to that question is clearly yes. Trudeau is that pretentious, presumptuous, careless, and uninformed. But after all, he doesn't bother himself with such trivialities as monetary policy. I gotta tell you, even though it's Peterson, I do love when people really go in on Trudeau. Right? This is something, I love listening to conservatives go in on Trudeau. I do. If any conservative wants to stand in front of me and go in on Trudeau, I'm not going to defend him. I think Trudeau's probably one of our worst prime ministers in history. Literally a guy that stood up and been like, this is an emergency by a pipeline, right? Get totally fucked. Imagine if the Prime Minister of Canada had actually gone, the Nazis are a problem, and then funded the Nazis. Same shit as far as I'm concerned. So if Peterson wants to go in on him, fantastic. But he goes in on him in order to turn the dagger and be like, and the solution is to vote conservative. Right? Third, on the international front, I have had extensive discussions with political and cultural figures in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Romania, Hungary, Estonia, Albania, Austria, Croatia, Slovenia, Poland, and Serbia. Wow, that's a lot of places. You know what an adult would write there? I've had extensive discussions with political figures in the across Europe, and then move on. This listing is just like, I'm so important. Look how important I am. And I know firsthand that Canada has hurt itself very badly on the reputational front with the derisive dismissal of the trucker convoy, which has spawned similar movements in other countries, most notably in the US and the Netherlands, with the imposition of the Emergencies Act, and, most signally, with the freezing of private bank accounts without due process or any pesky process at all. Perhaps Canadians are trying to downplay the significance of all of this, because we are in some state of shock after all the COVID overreach, which we have not yet sloughed off. And on that note, I have not seen people anywhere in all my travels more terrified by their government than Torontonians, except perhaps in Vancouver. And this includes the denizens of the almost equally woke as Canada states of New York and California. Everyone outside is asking, just what in the hell is going on in the Great White North? And not without true sorrow. Our country was for many years a beacon of both possibility and stability, a remarkable example of what a tolerant modern democracy might be. A place where people from multiple cultures could thrive, and a staid, sober, but also sporadically interesting and creative place. And because 3 catastrophes are not enough, here's an additional selection, peppered with some questions. How have Canadians failed to realize that our government holds them in contempt? That Trudeau believes that his God-given mission is to elevate the consciousness of his citizens, instead of serving their interests, economically and practically. That the Trudeau Liberals are perfectly willing to make us all poor, miserable, and demoralized, just to utterly fail in their efforts to save the planet. That the agents of that party and government are, as previously noted, perfectly willing and eager to trumpet that aim, which can be easily attained through the wretched combination of incompetence and moral Machiavellianism that characterizes the Trudeauites as a moral accomplishment. That we could be the freest, richest, cleanest country in the world, but that we are trying hard to be none of those 3. That we are dividing ourselves among racial lines that are more germane to the US, just to mimic the very progressive radicals whose policies are dooming the Democrats to what appears to be their worst electoral defeat in at least 50 years. That all the data on the environmental front indicates that the fastest way to improve the ecosystems on which we depend is to make people richer, not poorer. And to do that with good old capitalism. You see what he does? So that they have the luxury to think about the long run and the habitat of their children. So this paragraph is perfect. It's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Because all of this is true. Right? All of it is true. As far as I'm concerned. This might as well have come out of my mouth, as far as I'm concerned. Right? But then, and to do that with good old capitalism, there's the poison pill. There's the poison pill. Polyev does the same thing. Peterson does the same thing. Right? So, is to make people richer, not poorer. I agree. We should do that by passing a basic income, by having robust social systems, by transferring the means of production to the hands of the workers. Right? There's how you make people richer, not poorer. Right? And because if you do it with good old capitalism, you're just going to get this. Right? Einstein's definition of insanity. Right? Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting something different. But Peterson doesn't have an accurate analysis of his country and of the system that he lives in. Right? His analysis is strictly based on the idea that my tribe is better than your tribe. Right? That conservatives are better than liberals. That we need to give power to conservatives and they will rule more fairly than liberals, while failing to recognize that it's the structure of capitalism itself that is responsible for this, regardless of who takes power. And I have said nothing about additional issues, such as Bill C-11, which is perhaps the most appalling piece of legislation currently on the books, and that's tough competition, which renders virtually every internet content provider in the world subject to the rules that should not even still govern the CBC and CTV. I'm going to tell you right now, this is fucking delusional nightmare madness, right? Do you have any idea what would happen if we didn't pass the Broadcasting Act? There would be no such thing as Canadian content. It would be obliterated completely. Like the idea that anything other than that would happen is actually baby brain talk. Like, yes, we should have the Broadcasting Act, right? There's crucial Canadian television that is part of your memory sphere that simply would not exist. Simply would not exist. And because it was passed with the understanding that America is right there. It's got Broadway, it's got Hollywood. It's a massive cultural force, right? It's a massive cultural force. We absolutely need to do something to staunch the overwhelming cleansing of our culture from America. And how do we do that? The Broadcasting Act, right? So here you just have Peterson talking about shit he doesn't know anything about, which is typical. Or that we are pursuing energy policy generated by ideologues that will not only impoverish our populace by making energy unreasonably expensive. Have you noticed, Canadians, when you fill up your unnecessary vehicles at the pump? But that will only increase the probability that countries such as China will have to rely on coal to produce electricity instead of accessing, say, our plentiful natural gas. Like, as long as you dismiss climate change, you can say this stuff, right? As long as you're just like a climate change denialist and a dismissalist, you get to say this shit, right? Like, as long as you're a fucking deluded schizophrenic who doesn't medicate, you can say this shit. And that will therefore make the CO2 burden borne by the atmosphere greater instead of lesser. And just like, it's so weird that he simultaneously dismisses climate change while he does that fascist thing, right? The problem is both real and false. The problem is both insurmountably powerful and weak, right? And just last week, and in the aftermath of the Dutch farmer protests, that we are trying to reduce the absolute levels of greenhouse gas nitrous oxide produced by those who grow our food, regardless of the amount of those crops produced in consequence, and that we're doing that by threat and force, shades of COVID policy. And here's something true. Instead of working with the farmers to find mutually acceptable and truly sustainable economic and environmental solutions. I actually think that's true, right? That the Trudeau Liberals are ramming shit through because they're in a panic, because they never had a plan, And now they're being forced to find a plan. And so what are they doing? They're attacking people who don't vote liberal anyway. Right? They're choosing a group that it doesn't matter if they alienate and driving the nail into them while refusing to confront their owners in the fossil fuel industry. Or the incomprehensible insistence of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, sworn enemy of the real working person, that the proper role of the socialist NDP, finally Peterson using the quotation marks accurately, frankly, socialist NDP, to indefinitely prop up Trudeau's government, despite the fact that there seems to be nothing in it for Singh's party at all. Not even the cabinet position that a competent negotiator could have at least obtained as compensation for the sacrifice of his soul. How's that, eh? How's that? He does turn a phrase, eh? He's got Rex Murphy's kind of skill with language, right? The sacrifice of one's soul. I hope you guys are liking this. I fucking Peterson, right? But the reason why I think it's important is that we gotta know. We can't just ignore these guys. Like, Peterson is printing in one of the largest national papers in Canada. His perspective has been adopted by millions of Canadians. That conservatives across Canada are going to say these things. And we need to know. We can't just ignore them. Right? We can't just ignore them. Or the fact that our judiciary must now be staffed by people who swear... Oh, here's the diversity thing. Swear fealty to diversity, inclusion, and equity. Right, diversity, inclusion, and equity. You know, really horrible things. Ideology that has devastated universities and is now working its way through many careless corporations. That we are producing a generation of activist judges who are usurping what should be legislative action so they can improve the world more efficiently than mere parliament, with its lack of Chinese Communist Party efficiency, might manage. Like, I just don't know why conservatives do this. They admit that the Chinese Communist Party its system is more efficient. They just admit it. But then they're like, but that's bad because freedom. You know? Like, they admit that it's more efficient. Okay. Maybe we should think about it. No? Okay. Or the fact that the OECD has predicted that Canada will have the worst growth prospects of the major industrial societies for the next 4 decades. Please excuse the annoyed capital letters, but good God. The worst? And for 4 decades? And it's... I do have to say, I'm actually somewhat grateful that Peterson is bringing this stuff up. Right? Like, the liberal media isn't. This is fundamentally why I say that it's important to let, like, conservatives and liberals both talk. And I wish they'd let more communists into the conversation. But, like, I don't see any other commentator actually saying that out loud. And here's Peterson saying it out loud, right? There it is. It slipped through. Holy shit. We're actually admitting it, right? Oh yeah, they love to throw out buzzwords as well as conflating arguments, for sure. For sure. But this article we are going to hear people on the streets of Canada say. They're going to have read this. Oh yeah, Peterson, I read 12 books. Oh yeah, the lobster thing. Yeah, haha. Right? And we're going to see this on the streets, and we're going to see this. We're going to hear this. So we should know about it. I believe that the federal Liberals have run the most incompetent administration in Canadian history. Right? So we agree on that. Right? Like, this is what's fun about somebody like this guy, and the conservatives generally, is that I agree with a lot of the stuff they say. Right? It's just that their solutions are bad. Capitalism. Right? Vote conservative. Like, those are not solutions. Right? Those are not solutions. The solution to a knife wound is to stab it deeper. Take the knife out and put it back in the other way. That'll solve it. That they have not yet done all the terrible damage that they are going to do. That Canadians will not wake to the reality of the situation because an awakening at that level requires a level of conceptual restructuring and consequent emotional trauma that we have never been called on before to manifest. And that Trudeau's idiosyncratic combination of willfully blind ignorance, moral pretension, and narcissistic self-aggrandizement is toxic. Singh might, if anything, be worse. Like, project much, bro? Like, project much, bro? Just saying. Like, you think the Conservatives are better? He does. Yep. Capitalism with fascism is what JPB is selling. Yeah, JBP is selling, yeah. Trudeau's government has been racked by scandals, each one severe enough to justify the dissolution of Parliament under normal conditions. So numerous that it is almost impossible to recover from the shock of one revealed misbehavior quick enough to process the next. And we could have 4 more years of this, particularly if Singh continues to ambulate miraculously without a spine. Something physiologically impossible, but apparently simultaneously possible on the political and conceptual front. Dude, I gotta tell you, man, I'm actually so happy I'm reading this out loud just because of how deep he's ripping into these guys. I love it. I love it. Fuck these liberals, man. Fuck them. Even if you are like a hand-waving climate change denialist like Jordan Peterson, you can still see that these guys are frauds. Right? Like, they are. They're total fucking frauds. They're not interested in doing anything or helping anybody. Right? Just like the Conservatives. This is not good, Canadians. We not only look like fools to our great American allies and internationally, and the particularly self-righteous fools that only Canadians can be. I mean, project much, JP? We are actually being fools, led by the king of fools, and we're going to pay for it. The difference is that when Peterson says we're going to pay for it, he means that we're going to pay for it with money. Whereas when I say we're going to pay for it, I mean we're not going to have food to eat. Right? Like, that's the difference. And so are our children and grandchildren. Right? Because, again, like, they'll have less money. This government has to go. And the sooner the better. And hopefully, God willing, we'll be fortunate enough to find some competent adults to lead us. Conservatives, has Peterson been reading? Has Peterson been listening in? Has Peterson been listening into my channel? Sounds like it, guys. Sounds like it, right? So, some competent adults, right? Conservatives, do you have it in you? Pierre Poilievre, Jean Charest, Leslyn Lewis, Roman Baber, Scott Aitchison, can you shake off the mob-generated guilt and consequent moral timidity that has so effectively hamstrung opponents of the left radicals for the last 15 or 40 years and stand forthrightly for traditional values of family, right? Traditional values of family, right? So your dad's in charge. Your wife is subservient to your dad, right? You're not gay. You're not trans. You do what you're told and are respectful in a patriarchal structure, right? Traditional economy. Go to work, be quiet, right? Go to work on time. Work hard and you'll be rewarded. Ascend the hierarchy. It's a meritocracy. Culture, Christianity. Traditional culture, Christianity, right? Anglo-Christianity. And indeed, environment. Isn't it odd how this climate change dismissalist is actually still peppering in environment, right? Isn't it weird to see this guy who is just like hand-waving environmental issues away still bring them in and talk about them as if he cares about them, right? It's weird. Don't you think? Like, it seems as though the Conservatives are actually trying to admit, or it's just like they got into a room and they said, you gotta say environment. But who cares? You know, people care. You gotta say environment. It feels like that's what's happened. Where I lost my spot. Oh my god. Can you serve as genuine guardians of the working and middle class, and rich and successful entrepreneurs and business people for that matter, right? Because that's who he cares about. And put forward a positive and attractive vision that's more than mere reaction to the overreach of the utopian left? Can you withstand the temptation to destroy your party with internal squabbles or to settle in September for a candidate that displeases no one, but fails to truly satisfy anyone, as you have done much too often in the past? Rough times are a-comin', and with the cascading consequences of energy shortages, supply chain disruptions, war in Ukraine, and last but by no means least, severe and looming food and fertilizer shortages, the Liberals and NDP are gone into the utopian clouds. I pray we have in Canada something in reserve that is better, although it is truly hard to see how anything different from what we have now could be worse. I would argue that fascism would be worse, but not for Jordy, right? Not for Jordy. Jordy will do very well in a fascist environment. We'll see who cancels who, right? He keeps saying that we're the utopian left, or that the Liberals are the utopian left. Like, this is exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to his failure to properly analyze his society, right? Trudeau Liberals are not a utopian left. They're bought by the oligarch class, right? Notice how this guy doesn't talk about the oligarchy at all. That there is obviously an oligarchy in Canada that obviously runs the place, and that Trudeau and Singh work for them, right? Like, so again, for all his squalling, for all of his complaining and bitching, he's not actually talking about the subject accurately. And the whole thrust of the piece is vote Conservative, right? The Conservatives will do it! What are you talking about, dude? The Conservatives are going to come in and they're going to do what? They're going to serve the power structure, the oligarch class, the way the Liberals do. That's what they are. That's how they do. There's only one thing that I actually think might be possible. And I'm not saying this is a definite truth, but I'm definitely floating this idea out there. Something to keep an eye on as the Conservatives take power. Stephen Harper was a free market capitalist. Like, he believed in the principles of free market capitalism, right? It wasn't bullshit. He wasn't lying, right? And how do we know that's true? Because when the fossil fuel industry came to him for bailouts, he said no, right? That they got a little bit of money here and there, but nothing compared to what the Trudeau Liberals have done. And it's because Harper was like, what? You said that this was a free market enterprise, right? You are the ones that made the argument that you can run it better, you can run it more efficiently, you can do it better, and if you can't, then it fails. So, and that's how he lost support from that industry, because he wasn't willing to prop them up the way the Trudeau Liberals have. And there is an argument that floats out there that's saying, like, hey, like, solar and wind energy and like these sorts of alternative energy sources are actually getting to be cheaper than fossil fuels. Why aren't we transitioning? Well, why aren't we transitioning? Because we're subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, right? So there is an argument to be said that perhaps these Conservatives will get in and they'll go, no, it's a free market capitalist system, man. What's these subsidies? We're not paying for these subsidies anymore. Make it happen. If you can't make it happen, get the fuck out of here, right? Like, we'll see how it goes. Annex Canada. Annex Canada. Yeah, right. I'm sure we'll just go right. They don't need to annex Canada. They just don't need. Of course, the good doctor simply wants either a Skippy or Bernier Prime membership. Yeah. We must annex Canada to obtain their monopoly of maple syrup and breakfast foods. America does not need to annex Canada. Does not need to annex Canada, dude. Like, we are a vassal. We are a vassalized state to America. And it's always going to be that way. Like, if every time we stand up against America, we pay a cost. This is why I strongly believe that conservatives are far more dangerous than liberals, since conservatives want to actively destroy this planet by simply going more capitalistic. Yeah, Peterson explicitly states it here. The solution is to just do capitalism harder, right? Just do capitalism harder, right? Like, as if that's a fucking solution. Like, if your solution is to just keep investing in the system of failure, then you can never actually solve the problem. It'll never actually work. To be fair, during the reign of Harpo the Magnificent, Skippy was the Minister of Democratic Reform, and the target of this reform was to nullify certain pieces of ID. Yeah, and this is something like, just every government has positives and negatives. There's always something that you can look at, right? And be like, oh, they did do this, and they did do that, and there is this, and there is that, right? But I don't see it with the liberals. Like, this is the thing. Like, maybe that'll change as we get farther away, as, like, Trudeau goes away and we get more retrospective. Maybe we will look back and be like, oh, they did do this, and they did do that, but I don't see it. Like, if somebody can point something out to me, right? Can anybody point at anything these liberals have done that's as significant or as important as even the childcare benefit, which the Harper government put in? I can't. Tommy, not to go off track here, what music do you listen to? I've been listening to a lot of 90s alternative. So Nirvana, Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins, a progressive metal kind of guy to me. Yeah, I've just been like, I'm a 1983, right? So like all my culture was like 90s shit. And then I'm going back through a lot of like the pop music, because when I was a teenager, I was like, Britney, all that shit, right? And I'm going back through a lot of that stuff and being like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Like, there's good shit in there. And but like Black Hole Sun. Sometimes I just put Black Hole Sun on repeat and just let it wash over me. Just let it wash. Just wash. In areas that were likely to vote Liberal or NDP, yeah. JBP and conservatives love to throw out buzzwords, yeah. Capitalism with fascism is what he's selling, you got it. Traditional values, white Christian patriarchal society. Oh, Chris wants to do the number. Let's do the number. Let's do the number. Let's do the number. Number draw. Everybody get it. In the chat, it says there's 13 people. We should have 13 numbers. I'm still here with a 7. Still here with a 7. Here we go for today's number. July 27, 2022. 10 balls. Each ball has a number. Danarchist. Danarchist, I'm offended and insulted by your contribution to this very serious, deeply important number draw. Pick a number. Today's number is 2. How about that, Chris? The guy that kicked the whole thing off. He was like, it's a 2, John. Come on. Come on. I've been holding on to it, dude. I've been holding on to it. I know it's a 2 today, buddy. Come on. Come on. You got it. John. Come on. You got to do it. You got to do it. John, come on. Come on. Today's number draw. It's a 2. I know it. Well, Chris, may the energy of David Lynch carry into your life. May you be confronted with a situation that makes you go, what the hell? And then has you think about it for a long, long time. And then when you unpack it, you are a better person for having done so. Improvement. Thing about God is that he's gay. You want to explain that? No. Danarchist with your 11. What would you have done if it had been a 3? Huh? You would have felt like the right fool. You could have picked a 3 and been on board with someone like Engineered in Exile, but instead you picked a 13 as a joke. Well, it isn't a joke, good sir. This is very serious. We're dealing with cosmic energies. What a fucking joke, eh? Like, what a fucking joke this all fucking is. Unbelievable, man. Unfucking-believable. Oh, yeah. This I definitely want to talk about. Historic housing correction is underway in Ontario, RBC says. This is how much prices could fall. Does this have a graph? Nah, it's just like a little shitty article. Right? In a report, it now expects average home prices to decline by approximately 12%. Look, they're like ringing a bell, being like, ding, 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 everybody listen, very serious things are happening, everyone. Prices could drop by 12% from the February peak by about 2023. Here's their big fucking headline. Prices could drop by 12% in a year. Ding, 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 ding. Meanwhile, you know what's actually happening? Huh? What have I been saying? Toronto property listings are being cancelled at unprecedented rates. Sellers terminated 2,822 condo listings in June, a 643% increase. So, to recap, investors have bought the market. They have the housing. They're keeping it and using it as a form of currency. That's why they have it. It's a form of currency. They said, we'll be willing to part with our housing currency at this price level. Right? The rules of supply and demand no longer matter. Because the market is not being treated as a commodity, it's being treated as a currency. It's no longer supply and demand. Why? Because the people that have it don't need to sell it. They're not interested in selling it. They're interested in having it. I mean, I'm sure you could find a circuitous way of fitting supply and demand into this, right? But they have the housing, and they set the price way the fuck up here because that's the price that they're willing to part with their housing currency. For them, it's a currency swap. The faster we put this together, the easier it's going to be for us to understand what's happening. For the rich and the powerful, it's merely a currency swap. That they have the housing currency, and this is the number that they're willing to exchange that currency into the national currency, right? But they already have a ton of that money. They already have a ton of that currency. They don't need any more. And in fact, what they're looking for is an alternative form of currency, and they found it in the housing market. So what's the Bank of Canada's response? And what's the politicians' response? Well, we can't confront them and say you can't hoard that because we work for them. They're our owners. So, I don't know. Raise the rate. That'll convince people that we're trying to do something. Raise the rates. Right? So you raise the rates, which does have an effect on the market because there are still smaller players who are going to get punished for this. Right? And the price comes down. And who are they going to sell to? They're going to sell to the investors. Because the investors are the ones with the money. Right? They're not going to sell it to you. They're going to sell it to the investors. Because when the price drops, the investors can come in and be like, hey, I'll offer you 10% more than your listed price. And if anybody outbids me, I'll up the price. And they can do that because they have all the fucking money. Right? And so a bunch of people delist because that's the price that they're willing to sell. And they don't have to sell. That's the thing for people to understand. They don't have to sell. Right? And so the Bank of Canada is raising the rates, cratering the smaller people in the conversation, forcing them to sell at a lower price. To who? The investor class. Who, in turn, hoard the property and keep it for themselves. And will only sell it if the price is up here. Housing market, housing market, housing market. It's fucking dumb. It's fucking dumb. This shouldn't exist. This shouldn't exist. We should open a wicket at a Service Canada, let people walk in the door, and say, hello, I do not have a place to live. I am houseless. And they should say, let me take a look at your credentials, Canadian citizen. Ah, yes, I see you do not have a house, Canadian citizen. We will turn to the house hoarders, take the house from them, and give it to you. And if the house hoarders complain, we say, shut the fuck up and die. You're lucky we don't arrest you, you fucking worthless parasites. But John, won't that collapse the economy? Correct. Like, when people say that kind of shit to me, what I hear is, John, if you shoot a rocket into that vent at the Death Star, it'll blow up. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. The point is to destroy the economy. The point is to destroy the economy. The point is to destroy the economy. John, if you pass legislation that says you can't own a slave, it'll collapse the slave market. Correct. Oh no, my stuff! It's like that meme where like a guy is on the moon and the earth blows up and he's going, oh no, the economy. Like, interest rates are not being raised to cool a housing market, they're being raised to thwart wage gains. Yeah, Powell, Fed chair, said as much in June, correct. Yeah, that's also part of it. Well, if those who are hoarding houses and keep them off the market, that leaves less actually available for sales. That does not discount your thesis, however. Thank you, Watson. And thank you. And thank you. And thank you. Our corporate overlords are making more money in rent because they can charge whatever the hell they want. And they are, yeah. And there's no mechanism to prevent them, right? That if I move out of this space, the only, like, there are rent controls in Toronto that they can only raise the rent annually by a certain percentage, right? Right now it's like 2.5%, which is still grotesquely high if you ask me. But if I were to move, if I were to leave, right, they could raise the rent to whatever they wanted. And so landlords are incentivized completely in this environment to try to evict people. And they do all the time, right? If I were to be evicted from this place, I would not be able to rent in the city of Toronto anymore. That would be outrageous. I can tell someone upset you, John. Just life. You weren't here for it, Barnabas, but we just read an article from Jordan Peterson. So that might have something to do with it, don't you think? By the way, Will Lehman just nominated to run for UAW president. Excellent. I look forward to seeing him get completely chased out of the system by capitalist frauds. That's my expectation. Like, for those of you who don't know, Will Lehman is someone who is talking the way that I am talking. He is running to be the president for the United Auto Workers Union, one of the more powerful unions in America. I suspect he will simply be chased out of the system because the system is unreformable and corrupt. And that someone like Will Lehman, I suspect, will be absolutely someone we point to as evidence that the system cannot be reformed and is fraudulent, right? I fully suspect that he will have the support of people. I fully expect that people will swing his way and that he'll lose anyway. Just like Bernie, right? Like, you actually think they care about democracy? You actually think they care about this stuff? No, these people are psychos. They don't care. And as soon as the illusionary veneer of democracy is no longer working for them, i.e. if the people actually begin using it in order to secure material gains for themselves, right, or begin electing representatives who have the intention of doing so, they'll just do away with it, right? Like, somebody like Bill Gates literally doesn't need to participate. Someone like Elon Musk literally doesn't need to participate, right? They can hire their own mercenary force, right? They can go off to Jeffrey Epstein's sex island or whatever. They can retreat into their gilded palaces and say, fight me. Straight up. Straight up. Like, what did you think would happen if you gave someone $500 billion? Like, what did you think would happen if you gave somebody $100 billion? Well, you think these guys aren't going to use militarized, thuggish police forces in order to protect their capital? Yeah, they obviously are. Like, the most baffling position by the pro-capitalist class, right, by these frauds and hacks and losers, is that, the problem is the government. The problem is a system that is at least theoretically responsive to the demands of the public through an electoral system. And the solution is to cede all power and authority to a single individual and give them all the wealth, and they will certainly rule as benevolent dictators. Like, that is their position, right? That if you are a pro-capitalist like Elon Musk stan, your position genuinely is, Elon Musk would never do anything bad to us. Like, literally, the guy we elect and that we have the power to unelect, that's a worse system than let Elon be king. Like, it's baby brain bullshit. It's unbelievable that there are serious commentators still talking this way. Nova Scotia, how you doing? Finally got in. Were you struggling? Were you struggling, bud? Let me know, because I suspect they'll remove me eventually, right? It's a matter of time. I suspect I'll be off the airwaves eventually. But until such time. Until such time. Oh, yeah. This is an article from back in 2011. Just to give you a sense of how fucking psychotic we are. Could a small nuclear war reverse global warming? This sounds like something that was written by the Mad Hatter. Right? This sounds like something that was written by, like, the Mad Hatter. Literally, like, could a small nuclear war reverse global warming? And the whole tone of the piece. Nuclear war is a bad thing. Right? Scientists from NASA and a number of other institutions have recently been modeling the effects of a war involving 100 Hiroshima-level bombs, or 0.03% of the world's current nuclear arsenal, according to National Geographic. The research suggests 5 million metric tons of black carbon would be swept up into the lowest portion of the atmosphere. The result, according to NASA climate models, could actually be global cooling. From National Geographic. In NASA climate models, this carbon then absorbed solar heat and, like a hot air balloon, quickly lofted even higher, where the soot would take much longer to clear from the sky. While the global cooling caused by superpower on superpower war could be catastrophic, hence the term nuclear winter, A small-scale war could have an impact on the world climate, says National Geographic. Models suggest that though the world is currently in a warming trend, small-scale war could lower global temperatures 2.25 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 years following the war. In more tropical areas, temperatures could fall 5.4 to 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit. But the likelihood of disaster over reversing global warming is a more imminent concern, according to Time. From Time. Even a small exchange of nuclear weapons between 50 to 100 Hiroshima-sized bombs, which India and Pakistan already have in their arsenal, would produce enough soot and smoke to block out sunlight, cool the planet, and produce climate change unprecedented in recorded human history. In addition, the extreme weather caused by even a mild nuclear winter would have a tremendous effect on crops and famines, including creating a 10% global decrease in precipitation, according to National Geographic. The soot could also cause tremendous harm to the ozone layer, allowing more ultraviolet rays to reach Earth. The cons seem to outweigh the pros in the event of global cooling caused by even a small nuclear war. Thank God. Thank God they actually did it. Like, this looks like an article written by a courtier, right? Someone like the Mad Hatter writing an article for the Queen of Hearts, shouting, a nuclear war would help global warming. And the Mad Hatter comes up and shouts, well, actually, technically you're correct, Your Majesty. Technically, you're correct, Your Majesty. It would cause a cooling across the globe, absolutely. However, you'll never believe it. You'll never believe it, Your Majesty. And in the hopes that she would read the article and go, well, I suppose we won't do a nuclear war. Like, here's something I gotta point out. I just gotta point this out, right? It seems obvious to me, but it does need to be pointed out. Dun, 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 dun. My favorite, right? My favorite thing to look at, right? This is the increase in global temperatures for the month of June, starting from, I believe, 1880, moving up to the present day, right? Right? So, I'm going to pause it in just a second here. I got to clip that one, John. Thanks, Nova Scotia. I appreciate it. So, this spike up here, right? This spike up right here coincides very neatly with the nuclear bombing that occurred in Japan, right? Or World War II, generally, right? Look at that. Little jump up, World War II, thank you very much. Right? Right? Well, if we have another World War II, this is where we're at right now. We jumped up from here, from down there. It went boop, boop. Well, what would happen? Boop. What would happen? Who is Dean Praetorius? Sounds like a Roman centurion. I assume he is. Your Majesty, it has fallen upon mine responsibility to be the one to inform you of the dire and negative consequences, indeed, of launching even the smallest of nuclear war within the confined ecosystem of our hitherto untouched and unsullied land. May Zeus bless us from on high. Your humble centurion, David Pretorius. Wait, if nuclear war can help fix the climate, then why not just nuclear explosions? Why does anyone have to die? Contin. Come on, man. You can't just blow nukes up. We gotta find a reason to kill people with this shit. You can't just blow a nuke up off the coast of something. Forget that. Where's the fun in that? Come on. If we're gonna blow up some nukes, we gotta really blow somebody up, right? USA, USA, USA. Fucking USA chant. Anyway, so this was back in 2011, right? Remember 2011? Everything seems so much simpler then. Is he related to Biggest Dickus? Very good. Monty Python, absolute champion. Go away, Jordan. No one cares about you anymore. Russia and China are brewing up a challenge to dollar dominance by creating a new reserve currency. Russia is ready to develop a new global reserve currency alongside China and other BRICS nations in a potential challenge to the dominance of the US dollar. President Vladimir Putin signaled the new reserve currency would be based on a basket of currencies from the group's members: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The matter of creating the international reserve currency based on the basket of currencies of our countries is under review, Putin told the BRICS Business Forum on Wednesday, according to a TASS report. We are ready to openly work with all fair partners. The dollar has long been seen as the world's reserve currency, but its dominance in share of international currency reserves is waning. Central banks are looking to diversify their holdings into currencies like the yuan, as well as into non-traditional areas like the Swedish krona and the South Korean won, according to the International Monetary Fund. This is a move to address the perceived U.S. hegemony of the IMF, ING's global head of markets Chris Turner said in a note. It will allow BRICS to build their own sphere of influence and unit of currency within that sphere. Russia's move comes after Western sanctions imposed over the Ukraine war all but cut the country out of the global financial system, curtailing access to its dollars and putting pressure on its economy. The speed with which Western nations and its allies sanctioned Russian FX reserves, freezing around half, no doubt shocked Russian authorities, ING's Turner said. The Central Bank of Russia effectively admitted as much, and no doubt some BRICS nations, especially China, took notice of the speed and stealth at which the U.S. Treasury moved, he added. Those sanctions have likely encouraged Moscow and Beijing to work on an alternative to the IMF's international reserve asset, the special drawing rights, Turner suggested. While it's not a reserve currency, the SDR is based on a basket of currencies made up of the US dollar, the euro, the British pound, and Japan's yen, as well as China's yuan. One possibility is that BRICS basket currency could attract the reserves not just of the group's members, but also countries already in their range of influence, he suggested. These included nations in South Asia and the Middle East. Russia has seen its currency, the ruble, rebound to above its pre-war levels, thanks to central bank support, after it plunged 70% in less than 2 weeks after the Ukraine invasion. It has risen 15.2% in June to 1.87 cents. Meanwhile, the yuan has held steady at around 0.15 over the same period. Yep. So BRICS economic hegemony against U.S. hegemony. Lucky us. Here's the opening salvo of World War III. And more more evidence, right? More evidence that this Ukraine war has been a complete fucking disaster for the Americans. All it has done, it is created these alliances and had more and more anti-Western imperialist countries bind together as they see very clearly these people can't be trusted, right? You can't trust these people. The CIA is the largest terrorist organization on the planet by a lot, right? It's nowhere even close anywhere else, right? And this is a disaster for America, right? America doesn't produce anything, doesn't make anything, right? It has no manufacturing base anymore, doesn't actually do anything, right? All it's doing is parasiticizing other people's economies. That's all they're doing. By being this reserve currency, and forcing people to trade in dollars when they want to trade resources like oil on the quote-unquote international market, what should be called the imperial market, by the way. But if they just create an alternative market and cut the Americans out, well, what are the Americans going to do? They don't do anything. They don't produce anything. They don't make anything. Dude, Europe is fucked, man. Europe is the one that is totally fucked. The Ukraine war was never about Ukraine. It's about getting at the material resources of Russia to stop the advancement of China's One Belt, One Road initiative. But what's so stupid, like what's crazy to me about that, is that they could have had Russia as an ally. Russia wanted to be part of NATO. That's what's so fucking crazy about all this, dude. That, like, Putin was more than happy to be part of the international community. He was more than happy to be part of the empire, right? To be part of the imperial project, right? He was trying to. He applied for NATO membership. They said no. Like, that's what's fucking insane, man. I don't know who will win World War III, but I can tell you this World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Yeah. Just don't miss if nukes are used. I don't want to spend a week melting. Yeah, dude. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, no. And on that note, enjoy your ad break. Dr. Squatch lives. No, isn't that great? Isn't that great? You're welcome. You're welcome. Just like your daily dose of a reminder that capitalism drives us all mad. Like, once again, the culprit is capitalism. Danarchist, I want to say for just a second, I love your name, dude. Danarchist? I think that's the funniest shit of life. Like, time for some Danarchy. I have premium account, no ads here. Good for you. Good for you. Oh, Watson, sidestepping it. Well done. Well done. This is like another, like, Lynch roll of the dice. Like, who's going to get it? Who's not going to get it? Who's going to get it, right? And I love that you guys come in and report. You're, like, coming in and like, turning around and being like, this just in. Because I don't know what ads they give you. I don't know any of that shit. They don't tell me anything. They don't tell me shit. All right. I'm going to play a song. Let's put this one up. Oh yeah, this is a good one to do while I play this song. Got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so one day my maker I will meet. When death's sweet kiss comes to sweep me off my feet, I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice when everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice. Antarctica is covered in I will always believe that we can do it. I will never stop. Even if I find myself standing amongst the ruins of our civilization and the ground is nothing but sand, I will always believe that we can still do it. The earth wants us to be here. It created us. It created a garden for us. It created us, and then it let us play. And we have a very simple and clear choice in front of us. We can turn the place into a desert, or we can stop and do what the earth says. That's the choice that lies before us. And until the atmosphere itself disappears and the brutal reality of space exposes us completely to total death, I will always believe that we can do it. Because all we have to do is stop. It's all we have to do. It does warm my heart. So Drake, for example. Drake took a lot of heat from his own fan base because he took a short flight. And the Kardashians are beginning to take some heat from their fan bases because they're taking short flights places, which we all know are carbon emitters. But it's not going to be until we show up at these people's houses. It's not going to be until we surround their homes and let them know. It's not going to be until we show up at their tarmacs and destroy their planes with hammers. It's not going to be until we actually get in their way and physically let them know that they are psychopaths and we know it. Like, we should abandon these people. Like, for real. Like, we should abandon Drake. We should abandon Kim Kardashian. Watch what would happen. Watch what would happen if the populace suddenly bounced off of these figures in revulsion and treated them like the pariahs that they actually are. Watch what would happen in the cultural space. John, want to read these following articles? Number 1 is a funny article on how Poland is cosplaying as Americans. I could use some laughter. How bees can actually feel pain and have the self-consciousness to decide to feel pain or not. Oh, dude, let's do the bees one. I love bees. I used to do some beekeeping. You got this for me, bud? I don't really fucking care about the Polish, I gotta tell you. Like, near as I can tell, Poland is like is the remnants of a fascist state and is just waiting for an excuse. Anytime I look in on Poland, I'm just like, yeah, the second the whole thing goes fascist, you guys are just going to basically like pull off the robe and just go all the way. Like, I essentially I expect that to be the case in Poland. Ugh, I love bees, man. Bees are the coolest. Bees communicate through dance. Bees make decisions. We call the mother a queen. We say queen, but she's not a queen, right? She doesn't actually make decisions. There's this misunderstanding of how decisions are made in the hive, right? That the queen is treated more akin to a mother, right? Because that's what she actually is. She's going around and giving birth. She gives birth to all of the bees that are in the hive, right? But she's not actually making decisions. She goes out. The only decision that she really makes is which other bee she's going to mate with. Those are decisions that she makes, right? But what happens, and we've observed this, right? Like, we've observed this, is that bees will send out scout bees because they know that they have to split the hive. That's how they reproduce. That the hive splits. The queen goes with the already established colony, takes the oldest bees, the best trained bees, and go and find a new place to be, right? But before they do that, they send scouts out to find a good location in the first place. And what can happen is that so a scout bee will come back and will begin dancing the coordinates to the spot, right? And other bees in the hive can pick up the dance to communicate that they're down for this, that this is the way they want to go. Another bee can show up, and another scout bee land in and start being like, this is the place, here are the coordinates, this is the place. And depending, like, if one of the bees shows up and is kind of like, yeah, whatever, right? Like, this is the dance that they're doing. But the other bee is like, yeah, like really going to town on it, right? So one dance can overwhelm another dance. And what can happen in the hive is that you can literally have a dance-off where half the hive is dancing one way and the other half is dancing another way. And this can actually split the hive and send both groups in separate directions. We know that bees can tell direction by the sun. We know that they can tell time, right? They're much more intelligent than we think they are. Yeah, you're too rich when you can afford a 15-minute flight. Yeah, absolutely, dude. Absolutely. Let's talk about bees, baby. Bees may feel pain. I gotta tell you guys, I've worked with bees. They for sure can feel pain. Like, you just gotta interact with them for a while. It doesn't take a genius. Like, they can feel pain. For sure. We swat bees to avoid painful stings, but do they feel the pain we inflict? A new study suggests they do. A possible clue that they and other insects have sentience, the ability to be aware of their feelings. It's an impressive piece of work with important implications, says Jonathan Birch, a philosopher and expert on animal sentience, and London School of Economics, who is not involved with the paper. If the study holds up, he says, the world contains far more sentient beings than we ever realized. Previous research has shown honeybees and bumblebees are intelligent, innovative creatures. They understand the concept of zero, can do simple math, and distinguish among human faces, and probably bee faces too. They're usually optimistic when successfully foraging, but can become depressed if momentarily trapped by a predatory spider. Even when a bee escapes a spider, her demeanor changes. For days after, she's scared of every flower, says Lars Chitka, a cognitive scientist at Queen Mary University of London, whose lab carried out that study as well as the new research. They were experiencing an emotional state. To find out whether these emotions include pain, Chitka and colleagues looked into one of the criteria commonly used for defining pain in animals: motivational trade-offs. People will endure the pain of a dentist's drill for the longer-term benefits of healthy teeth, for example. Similarly, hermit crabs will leave preferred shelves to escape an electric shock, only when given a particularly high jolt, an experiment that demonstrated crabs can tell the difference between weak and strong painful stimuli, and decide how much pain is worth enduring. That suggests crabs do feel pain, and simply don't respond reflexively to unpleasant stimulus. Partially as a result of that study, crabs and other crustaceans, including lobsters and crayfish, are recognized as sentient under UK law. Chitka's team gave 41 bumblebees a choice between two high-quality feeders, containing a 40% sugar solution, and two feeders with lower percentages of sucrose. The researchers placed the feeders in a testing arena on top of individual heating pads, colored pink or yellow. Initially, all the heating pads were turned off. The bees entered the arena one at a time and sampled the feeders. They had to sip from each one to detect the amount of sugar. All preferred the feeders with the most sugar. The scientists then warmed up the yellow pads beneath two of the high sucrose feeders to 55%, a temperature high enough to cause the bees to consider leaving, but not so high as to cause injuries. Feeders on the pink pad stayed cool. For a bee, landing on a hot yellow pad would be like us touching a hot plate, says lead author Matilda Rose Gibbons, a behavioral neuroscientist and PhD student on Chitka's lab. But bees that could withstand the pain would also get more sugar. When given a choice between hot, sugar-rich feeders and cool, low-sugar feeders, the bees chose the former. The scientists report today in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Scientists. If the sugar was super concentrated, the bees would put up with more pain, Gibbons says. They could walk away whenever they wanted, but they didn't. Getting that sugar was a huge motivator. When both the hot and cool feeders held high sugar solutions, the bees avoided those on the yellow pads, demonstrated that they use associative memories when choosing where to feed, the scientists report. Besides crustaceans, this is the first direct demonstration that arthropods, a group that also includes insects and spiders, can also do trade-offs, Birch says. He calls the study intellectually fascinating and ethically important, given growing interest in farming insects for human consumption, and the complete lack of research into the welfare need of insects. Still, it remains unclear whether bees really feel what we call pain. The scientists point out that their study does not provide formal proof of this ability. Given its subjective nature, proving that insects feel pain is probably impossible, says Greg Neely, a behavioral geneticist at the University of Sydney. He has shown fruit flies' nervous systems can experience chronic pain, but he doubts that insects will have the neurological systems to allow pain to register as a complex emotion. Definitively proving insects mentally feel pain probably isn't possible, agrees Jennifer Mather, a zoologist and cephalopod expert at the University of Lethbridge, whose studies help prove those animals are sentient. Nevertheless, given that insects represent at least 60% of all animals, she says, we can't ignore them. There is still anthropocentrism in Western science that rejects the idea of caring about dumb invertebrates. Papers like this one will gradually chip away at this self-centered attitude. I've been working with bees, like, I'm really, God, I would love to set up a hive here in Toronto, dude. It's so fucking impossible. The number one hurdle to setting up a hive is that you can find people that are like, yeah, okay, we'll set up a hive. But then you got to ask the neighbors, right? And there's always one. There's always a Karen. There's always, I don't want bathe. Bathe? Nah. That always, 100% of the time, right? So that's it. So you can't set up a hive because there's some asshole that's like, bees are gonna sting me, like that, and it is that stupid and pedantic, right? But when I worked with bees, right, and whenever I do interact with bees, like, I have considered them to be sentient. I consider them to be alive and aware of what's going on. They know too much. They're too intelligent. They make decisions democratically. They care about one another, right? They fight for their hive, right? They obviously have emotions and feelings. I remember one time, I became so convinced of this when I went to we went to a site that had been invaded by bears, right? And what bears do when they invade beehives is that they grab one of the hives and pull it off, right? And it's very destructive and very disruptive. And when we showed up to clean this up, you could tell the bees were pissed. You could tell they were pissed. They were angry and upset, and they were letting us have it, man. Like, we had gotten to the point, or I had gotten to the point with these bees that they had begun to recognize me. That I could show up to a site, and they were like, "Oh, it's this guy," right? And they were docile, so I wasn't really wearing the equipment anymore because there wasn't a need to, right? That they weren't stinging me, right? They knew what I was there to do. They knew what I was trying to do, right? But when we showed up on that day, I had to put on the equipment because they were like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, right? Very straightforwardly. Like, so this idea that like insects are not inert. They have, like, bees, I mean, I can speak for bees. They live in colonies. They make decisions. They know what they're doing, right? They know what they're doing. Maybe they can't explain, like, why are we making all this fucking honey, right? Maybe they can't explain that, but they do, and we should be grateful for them because they what they produce is a miracle food. Honey is a miracle food, right? It's an absolute wonder. And I would, like, to me, you get thinking about what do you want to do with your life and what would you actually like to pursue. You know what I would like to pursue? I want a little parcel of land, right, to grow a garden and have some bees. And that's really what I want to do. I want to take care of these bees and make sure that they are doing well, make sure that they are happy, well fed, make sure that they're undisturbed, so that they can pollinate food and just be bees. Just be bees. One of the most impressive inventions, we get talking a lot about, like, human innovation, right? Well, one of the most impressive inventions is the bee box that got made, right? Before the bee box, how it was is that you just took bees and you jammed them into a like a basket, like a woven basket, and the hive would be in the woven basket. And then once the bees filled the hive up with honey, you would crack it open, destroy the hive, right, and get the honey out of it, which was very disruptive and displaced the bees completely. So along came some fella in the 16th century, I think his name was like Lystrom or something like this, and he discovered that there was something called bee space. It's it's 3/4 of an inch, that if you put two slats side by side at that space, bees will not fill that space, right? And so he found out that you could put a slat of wood and bees would fill it up with honeycomb, and then you could extract that slat by itself. And what this really allowed beekeepers to do is create bee boxes that were exclusively for the colony, for eggs, right? So you'd have a bee box that was just the colony full of eggs, and then you'd have boxes on top and below of it that would fill with honey. And that you could come along and you could open up one of the hives and be like, oh, this slat has eggs in it. So the queen's been coming up and has been getting into this and has been planting eggs. So we're going to take that and we're going to retransplant it in a different box. So this will be exclusively for honey. And you can also do things like there are mesh. Queens are bigger than other bees. And so there's a little mesh blocker that you can get that will allow bees into the bee box, but it won't allow the queen. The queen's too big. It can't get through. And so you can prevent the queen from even getting into this bee box, so it will be honey as a guarantee. And of course, the happier your bees are and the more well-fed your bees are, the more honey you get. Right? And there are other methods that you can do to get more honey. Right? There are other things that you can do. Man, I miss being a beekeeper. I really do. And the trouble is, of course, like, I don't have any land, right? I don't have land. And who are you're gonna convince a bank to give you a bank loan to become a beekeeper, right? Like, to compete in the market, you've gotta have like an industrial farm, right? Like, you can't just be like a small scale beekeeper and pay your rent or any of that. Once again, the culprit is capitalism, right? When the bees will need check which spot has... Then the bees will need to check which spot has better Yelp reviews. That's hilarious, dude. That's a real, like, Jerry Seinfeld kind of a joke. We humans are weird. Do other life forms feel stuff? Yeah, probably. The bees are our brethren. Our beethrin. Very well done, Major. You're on fire, dude. You gotta write these jokes down, dude. You could make a bee movie too. Honey never goes bad. Thoughts on solitary bees? I'm not sure what to think of that. Like, what do you mean? Like a bee by itself? Is a bee by itself? I don't know what to say. Let's pitch in for a commune. Yeah. Just today, one of my friends was looking at a space out in the boondocks, like a huge house, like 20 acres of property. They're renting it out, like 7 rooms, and they're renting it out for $4,000 a month. And I'm like, yeah, if we got 7 people to all live in this communal space and I'll start farming the land and using the land, we could probably get $4,000 together, right? Any of the various bees that do not live in colonies. Oh yeah, they're just living a different life. That's all. They're not honeybees. They're just a different type of bee. That's all. And what you'll find is that these bees, like, they don't live in colonies, but there is usually some kind of community. They usually are like, it's like bears, right? Like bears don't live like, bears live together, but they don't. You know what I mean? Like, they have their own territory. They kind of stay at arm's length with one another, but they still do come together, and like there is like a social element to being a bear. But and it's the same with those kinds of bees, that they're not actually by themselves, right? That they're just kind of, I got my space, you got your space, I'll be here, you be there, right? And then we come together and we kind of buddy up and do stuff, right? Mate, for example. And people can put what's called bee hotels together. So you can put together like a little, like, it's like a bird feeder. And these types of bees will come to the bee hotel, and they'll stay and be very temporary and all of this. Libertarian bees, yeah. No, I mean, like, libertarianism, dude. What a fucked up. Like, it just doesn't. Like, libertarianism really is the idea that if we make no plan, everything will work out. Like, probably not, bro. Like, straight up, probably not. Probably not. Well, this was nice, Eric. Thanks so much for this article. Bees. I love learning stuff about bees, man. They're so cool. And they live such a wonderful life, right? The most difficult thing about raising bees, and this is actually something that I would love to do. I would love to do is I would love to breed bees. That you can definitely do this, and bees are not indigenous to North America, and especially Canada. And if you go back to the 60s, the strategy for beekeepers was actually, when the season ended, they literally killed their bees, right? Because they would die over the winter. They had no method of saving them, right? It wasn't efficient or cost efficient to actually save the bees, right? And so they would kill them off, and then they would just get in more bees when the season got better, and they would start anew. And they'd have all the equipment and everything, and they'd have all the hives set up so the bees could get rolling, right? And it's only been fairly recently that we have found a way to protect the bees from the elements. So what it is that you surround the hives with pads to insulate them a great deal, and you give them enough honey, obviously, to make it through, so they eat the honey, and access like a little tiny hole, right? So that's well protected, right? So that they have a way out, so that they have access to water and things like this. And if you're really smart, you'll find a way to really insulate that whole process. And what the bees do is they'll swirl within the hive. They'll swirl within the hive. And the outside layer is literally swirling around in a circle, while the inside of the group is huddled and resting and taking advantage of the warmth of the hive, and then they'll switch out. So there's always one group that's in constant movement, and that movement generates heat. And so if you can insulate the hive, and keep it closed and keep it tight, then the movement of the hive can keep it quite warm for them, and they can survive, right? They can survive, and of course, like if you get real smart about it, right? You can start like bringing the hives indoors. You can start doing that kind of stuff. And so my goal would be to start doing selective breeding, and start breeding selectively for hardiness and for durability, right? That I would want to try to create a bee that was more resilient and more capable of withstanding temperatures, and more capable of handling the harsher winters, right? And because that's got to be the hardest part for them living here in Canada. It's got to be the hardest part for the hives is the winter. The winters are long and harsh and brutal, and so you want to create and selectively breed the bees to be hardy and strong and capable. And I would for sure set myself to that. I would definitely want to do that, because we're going to need that. We're going to need that. And I know nobody's doing it. Right? I know nobody's doing it. How do I know? Because I've looked around. And you know what it is about bees that I really love? more than anything. It's that they just simply by their existence, just simply by the force of their existence, they are giving something to the world. That's when I started working with bees and learning about bees and figuring something out about bees. That's really what made me fall in love with the earth in a more significant way. Because it made me realize that the earth creates creatures whose only purpose, near as anyone can tell, is to improve the place. It does do that. And bees are the case in point. Bees pollinate our food. They make our food better. They pollinate our flowers. They make the place gorgeous and beautiful. Right? Bees help and improve everything they touch simply by touching it. When they land on a little flower and they spread their pollen around and all of that, they're just having a good time getting the nectar that they need, right? And then they go back, they take that nectar, they go back to the hive, they turn it into honey, and they produce way more honey than they'll ever consume. Ever consume. And they just do it. They're just constantly doing it. And if you set them up in a hive so that you don't need to disturb them when you take the honey, they don't seem to mind. That's the most interesting part. Is that you can fill one of these boxes with honey, and then you just come along, and as long as you don't, disrupt them, you can just take the hive, move it off, get the honey. They don't seem to mind. So you got these little creatures. You got these little critters existing in the world, and all they do is make the place better. That's all they do. And you can't get a hive in the city because some asshole is like, they might sting me. Yeah, of course they're going to sting you. You're a dumb idiot. Like, you should be stung by a bee, you stupid fucking moron. Get the fuck out of here. What's hilarious is that the more you work with bees, the less the stings matter. Like, at first you're like, and then you gotta, like, get it treated, and, like, you get a thing and all that kind of stuff. By the end of that season, like, a bee would come and sting me, and I'd be like, ow. And it'd be it. It'd be over. The worst is when they would get caught in my hair. That was always the worst. That was always the worst. Oh, man. This is making me really nostalgic. Yeah, Karens are gonna go ape shit over these bees. Yeah, dude. Like, oh no, it's a bee, right? It's a bee. Like, I understand if you have, like, an allergy or something. Like, that's... I've encountered that, where somebody was like, no, I have an allergy. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Like, if I had an allergy to something, I wouldn't want it near me, for sure. But that's usually not the case. The case is usually, like, they'll sting me. I have a dog. I have a little puppy. And my little puppy will get stung by a bee. Like, maybe your dog should get stung by a bee once. Figure out don't eat bees, right? Moving on. Rising food, rent costs eat into young professionals' disposable income. No fucking shit. Wow, it turns out, guys, did you know? Big headline, big news. If you raise the price of everything, people will have less income. No fucking shit. Yeah, it's pretty easy to avoid bee stings. Wasps scare me more. Yeah, as they should. Wasps are just fucking stinging you because they want to. Near as I can tell, wasps are literally like... With inflation at nearly 40-year high, Canadians are feeling the financial strain. In a 6-part series this summer, the Canadian press is speaking to people at different stages in life to see where they're being hit the hardest. This story details the experiences of young professionals. Every time Afua Deborah fills her grocery basket, it's a shock to the system. It's insane to see the price of, say, broccoli double, or something really menial, like green onions, double or triple, she said. Like many Canadians right now, groceries are putting a big strain on 28-year-old Deborah's pocketbook, especially now that she is no longer living with her parents. The inflation rate for food, which reached 8.8% in June compared to the same time last year, continues to outpace the broader rate of 8.1%. Deborah, who lives in Toronto and has been working as a front-end developer for the last 2 years, said rent is the other major variable eating away at her income and ability to save for big goals, like buying a house. That's after she has scaled back on a lot. A July report by real estate market research firm Urbanation, Inc. found that rents in the Greater Toronto Area are rising fast, with dropping vacancy rate in the second quarter pushing up the average rent to $2,533, a 5.9% increase compared to the first quarter. Housing costs are rising in other cities too. The average rent for all Canadian properties was $1,885 in June, an increase of 9.5% annually, according to rentals.ca. As for easing discretionary spending, Deborah is scaling back on outings to restaurants and bars, not even bothering with concerts, noting how often they're getting canceled. Instead of let's go here, 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 and here, it's more like, okay, let's go here and let's share something. Maybe I won't buy a second drink, she said. Or, I might have friends over and we'll split Uber Eats or something like that. Just seems a little more conscientious. Travel is one activity she was hoping to get back into, but is holding off because plane tickets and accommodations have gotten pricier. The ongoing delays at airports is another factor influencing her decision. Day-to-day transportation has also become increasingly tricky. It's sad. It's sad grappling with the fact that this city that you were born and raised in is now becoming less and less habitable, she said. It seems like regardless of how careful professionals in the 20 to 34 cohort are with their money, many are still finding it difficult to navigate the current economic climate, especially while trying to enjoy the pleasures of life as a young person and prepare for the future. People are finding it impossible to balance it all. It costs significantly more to simply exist, professional finance expert Danica Nelson said. People are trying to figure out how to do more with less. Inflationary pressures have even pushed some young professionals out of the country altogether, especially as wages lag. Average hourly wages rose 5.2% on a year-over-year basis in June, up from 3.9% in May and 3.3% in April, according to the most recent jobs data from Statistics Canada. That's still well below the pace of inflation. Jen Shea, who grew up in Toronto, is a marketing professional in the fintech industry and has been working and living abroad for the last several months. She now lives in Switzerland, where she said she is making significantly more money and has been able to save more than she did while working in the city she was raised in. Not to mention, the work-life balance and overall working culture feels more relaxed than what I experienced on Bay Street, despite still staying in the same industry of financial services. Shea said she couldn't have maintained the lifestyle she had now without her parents' help when she was in Toronto, as her salary wasn't keeping up with the cost of living. If salaries were higher and cost of living cooled in Toronto, I probably would have stayed there happily instead of moving to work abroad, Shea said. To get through inflationary periods like this one, Nelson said budgeting is imperative. She also advises young professionals to set up sinking funds, which are reserves of money set aside for different expenses, and oftentimes bigger expenses. Every month you put money in one or multiple funds to be used for a later date. Additionally, she suggests going back to some low-cost activities from the early day of the pandemic, whether it be picnics, walks, or bike rides, in order to save some cash while maintaining a social life. With the potential of a recession looming, Nelson is encouraging young professionals to bulk up their emergency savings accounts or create one, if they haven't already. Despite all of the economic uneasiness right now, there is a segment of young professionals who aren't overly worried. Toronto-based portfolio manager Charlie Digalakis said the current economic climate has certainly caught his attention, especially the high gas prices. But he feels confident in the decisions he's been making amid the trifecta of soaring inflation, high housing prices, and rising interest rates. I think I've been budgeting really well during this time, and if I have to continue to draw back on some of my expenses that aren't necessities, then I'll continue to do that, he said. So what did this article capture? They captured the collapse of the economy, right? People are spending less. So if I spend less on food, and that means the person providing the food gets less money, right? And then that means that they spend less money on the other side. And so the loop that is an actual economy, it's not like a straight up rocket to the moon, the way that these fake false capitalists pretend like it is. If this goes less money, this is less, and this is less, and this and less, right? Then the whole thing stops working eventually. Because eventually you don't have enough money to pay for the goods at all. And it just gets funneled into the big pile of gold. What's the second thing that we saw in this article, right? The second thing that this article captured is that the richest people will leave, right? The richest people, the people who can afford it, will simply leave. That it's a policy of extraction and abandonment. And that includes people who are workers. That if they can afford to abandon the society that is collapsing, which is what we're capturing, they will. Like, this gets worse. This gets significantly worse than this. By a lot. Like, by an overwhelming degree. I think about my own job, right? Like, what does my job rely on? Right? It relies on people coming through the door in order to buy what is ostensibly luxury goods. Right? Food, like chef-made food, pastries, lattes, those sorts of things. Right? My job relies on that. If no one comes, we shut down. Well, what would be the number one way to ensure nobody came? Would be to make sure nobody has any money. And what would be the number one way to ensure that is? Jack the rent. Right? Jack the rent, jack the cost of housing, jack the prices, jack inflation, jack fuel, jack all of it. Suddenly you'll just have a culture of people who are paying just to have a house. Right? Which is exactly what's going to happen. That people will just be paying in order to have a house. And eventually what's going to start happening is that businesses, in order to survive, are going to raise their prices so dramatically because they're going to have to, because they're going to be catering to the people who have money. And the people who have money are going to have such an overwhelming amount of money, that it won't matter. It won't matter to them what the price is. If you have $1 billion, it doesn't matter that if your latte is $10, $15, $50, $100. Doesn't matter. You don't even think about it. You just take your credit card and put it against the machine and it goes beep and then you go get it. Because you have $1 billion. Right? You don't even think about it. Maybe you look at it with like a little curiosity and go like, huh. And move on with your life. Right? This idea that we're going to create a market to throw out a big net to capture as many people as possible with a price point that can be, well, those people have no money. The vast majority of the populace will have no money. And so every business is going to shift into being an empty store with a single pedestal that's offering a single thing, like a bag or a shoe. And no one will ever go into that store except once a year, one person will go into the store and buy the shoe. And the price will be so high on that shoe that that one purchase from that one person, that one time, that 1 year, will pay for everything. That's what our economy will look like. That people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates will be the only people who will even have money to be able to afford anything. And so the price to provide the good to them will be set so high because they will bear the sole responsibility of maintaining your entire business. And what's the end result? The vast majority of the public will not have access to these goods. They will simply not be able to afford them. That's what's coming for our economy. That's what's coming for all of it. And what does that mean? It means mass layoffs. It means that businesses close, right? Because the truth is that billionaires don't need a million lattes, right? They need one. So you just need to be the place that's nearby, right? Just be the latte place near Bill Gates and sell him a $3,000 latte, right? Put little gold flecks on it or whatever, right? But the Starbucks down the way, that's in the middle of like a little town, right? Well, nobody's going to go there because they have no money. They can't afford it. So it's going to shut down. So you're going to have huge spikes of unemployment. You're going to have people who can't find work. The work that they can find is going to be temporary and menial. The gig economy, the sharing economy, the little fucking annoying slogan, cutesy word that they use to describe this collapsing economy, right? The gig economy, the fucking sharing economy, these fucking demonic turns of phrases to be like, tee-hee, sharing economy, tee-hee, your suffering is cute to us. Like, and these liberals and these NDPers are doing fuck all about it. They don't care. Doesn't matter to them. They're detached from it, right? People like Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau are completely insulated from it. It doesn't matter to them at all. All they're going to do is tilt their head and go, "Oh, vote Liberal." That's all they're going to do. And the Conservatives will be worse. Get a job. Just get a better job. Just get another job. Get a better job. That's all you're going to get. It's so stupid, you know? Like, it's so stupid. That's the thing that I just keep thinking over and over again, right? Like, what is it for? It's so that someone who has $1 billion can have 2. It's so that someone who has $10 billion can have 50. It's so that someone whose quality of life is already entrenched and guaranteed, that it doesn't matter if they have $2 billion as opposed to $1 billion. It's so that they can pat themselves on the back and say, "Good job, bucko. You did it. You got more." That's it. That's all it's for. That's the insanity of the age. That's the insanity of the age. That all of the stress and the pain and the suffering and the anxiety and the fear, all of the guilt and the shame and the loathing, all of the despair and the alienation, all of the hatred and the arguing, it's all so that one guy can go, huh, yeah, higher number. Like, this is a mass hysteria. This is a mass hysteria. We are caught in this downward spiral of extraction and abandonment. And the only way it's going to end is if we start gathering en masse and surrounding these people's homes. There's no other solution. They haven't given us another solution. Their system of electoral politics has failed and will continue to fail. They've bought it. They've guaranteed its failure. What else? If you can find an alternative, you let me know. Because I would love to be able to go to the ballot box and put a paper in a box and have this problem resolve itself. That would be my preference, in fact. But that's not real. That doesn't exist. Gather yourself with loved ones. Surround yourself with people you love. Do your best. Keep fighting, keep trying. Always remember, you are a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.